Sydney.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
Welcome. You are on deck.
Awesome.
How do you like that?
It's awesome. Here we go.
This is your first ever podcast. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
You said you listen to a lot of podcasts, though.
Plenty.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do you have one that you like in particular?
I keep discovering more and more that are, they're for different reasons why I like them.
Right.
Some for comedy, some for, self-betterment, others for entertainment.
Mhm.
Like, there's a whole roster. If you want me to give shout-outs, I can.
Well, let's talk about the self-betterment.
Okay.
Right. What is your self-betterment topic of the month, week, this era of your life right now? What are the things that you're drawn to?
Mental wellness, really. Keeping it positive, keep growing, be really honest as to where you need to kind of make those improvements.
Mhm.
Those hiccups where you're like, oh, I thought I was past that. No, you're not.
Isn't it amazing that, like, as you go through life, you think, okay, I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm developing. And then do you ever find yourself where you're like, fuck, like I did that again?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Those are those patterns you find.
Right.
Those coping mechanisms where you're like, oh, that's a good thing. Maybe not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Like I still, I'm always focused on growth. I'm always focused on learning from, I believe that you either win or learn.
Yeah.
Right. And so I try to take that philosophy with everything. I know my wife feels the same way.
Mm. And
we're always on that path, but you still find sometimes that you're like, wow, I can't believe I stumbled over that again. Like, why? Right.
Yeah.
Why do you think we do that sometimes? Like, go back. It's almost like you almost know when you're going to make a dumb mistake or do something that you've already done before and didn't work.
Yeah, that's self-sabotage. Self-sabotage.
Right?
Yeah, where you're like, oh, I know that's an issue, but I've got all my tools together. I can go ahead and if that pops up again, I can move past it. And you're trucking, you're going, and then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, hold on, I think I did it again. Because you're just in that mode. You're trying to be, as honest as you can in that moment,
right.
But then you end up hitting that hiccup, and until that other person reacts, you're like, oh, I think I did it again. Especially if you're kind of just in your own bubble, kind of like individualistic, like I'm moving, I'm learning, I'm doing my thing. And until it comes into practice, then you're like, oh,
it's hard.
I learned
sometimes.
it, but I didn't do it.
You said something interesting, self-sabotage, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's a word that a lot of people use in regards to themselves, right? But I know that I, find myself thinking that from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it. Time's kind of close the door. It's so funny as we start this off. There's just like little kinks here and there.
Yeah, the perfect imperfections. Here it
exactly.
goes.
That's what it's all about. But self-sabotage, why, like if you were to say that, then that means that you probably recognize that you do that from time to time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think you do that?
I don't know. You find yourself in these patterns that you don't recognize just yet, right? But you get little hints, like especially if you're kind of already in that industry or in that mindset of self-betterment.
Mm-hmm.
You hear the terms, but you're like, oh, that's not me, I'm looking out for, certain instances where that could happen, but that's not happening right here. But in retrospect, you're like, hold on, I had that idea in the beginning and I didn't confront it like right in that moment. I kind of kept pushing it forward, just kind of keep it positive.
Right.
But you kind of had it in the back of your mind, but you didn't openly address it in all the details and all the ways that you see it kind of manifest as things go on.
Mm-hmm.
And then when things kind of go kaboom, you're like, hey, I saw that coming.
Right.
Yeah.
You almost always know, like you kind of know, and it's really it almost becomes a subconscious act of allowing yourself to go down a road where this is not the best road for me, and it might not be anything drastic, but even it can be little things, right?
Yeah.
Where you just realize, like, why the fuck am I doing that still? It just
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. Do you think this is what I think?
Mm-hmm.
Two things in regards to this, because you talk about a positive mindset, which I always, I'm a big believer in. PMA, positive mental attitude, right?
Yes.
But there's the negative mind that is always just there, just waiting, just to to let you know something that really is not productive for you to hear.
Yeah.
But do you think sometimes we self-sabotage because we're afraid to actually to fully become what we are intended to be? You're almost afraid of your own potential greatness.
Yeah.
Because it's like to become what you think you can fully be, there's some scariness to that,
Yeah.
right?
That what people call that, like, that's, integrating the shadow. Like, it's there.
Right.
Like, you hear that voice every once in a while, but like, that's not my intention. That's not what I'm here for. But you call that, like, well, I called it awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I'm aware that it could possibly be this kind of interpretation, but I'm going to keep it positive. It's not that. People are, hopefully on the same spectrum where they're trying to do better things, right?
Right.
But I'm aware that possibly they might be on a different journey. They might be over here. Just put a pin in that. Put that over there.
Right.
And then when things go, when all is kind of just like the rug is kind of, lifted and all the dust flies up, you're like, oh, okay, that was there. Should have said something.
Right.
Could have said something. Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Mm-hmm.
But, then it's either you address it, you leave it, or you just,
Well, I think it's our duty to ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to anybody that loves us or that we love to, you gotta every now and then you just gotta stand in the mirror and say, okay,
Yeah.
right? Like,
This is what happened.
You're doing good, but there's some areas that you still need some work on, and you legitimately need to make the commitment to do that.
Yeah.
Right. See, look at this. Here we are, right?
Yeah.
Talking about these kind of topics. Actually, we're just getting started, but before we started, we were referencing one of the first conversations that we had like this a long time ago here at the office, where like you just started. It was pretty new, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were having pizza and wine. We were talking, and pretty much within about 25 minutes, I think the conversation started to go to like philosophy. Maybe we were going into aliens and the spirit and the soul. I can't remember. Do you? I just remember it was a really interesting conversation, and you and I were very engaged in like, oh, this is a cool conversation that we're having right now.
Yeah, it started in entertainment, like, oh, what are you watching right now? What are you enjoying?
Right.
And then it went into the levels of like philosophy and time and people and societal commentary. It went into all of that stuff, and I was like, yeah, that's what I like.
Right.
Yeah, because like when I watch something, I want it to feed my brain a little bit.
Yes.
Like, give me a perspective that I haven't really like called out or kind of got hints of, but here they are like illustrating it on scene, you know? And so it kind of like gives you a visceral experience of what you've kind of already been getting little glimpses of.
I find that entertainment now, particularly the shows that I like watching, are the ones that really, that they really go deep into, whether it's thought processes or philosophies or, things don't work out the right way, and how do humans really, how are humans fundamentally real and human and flawed, and you get to really witness the dynamics of people's characters, and whether it's in a scene or how it's written.
Yeah.
That makes it interesting, right? Where it's just, it's real.
You have to dig for those.
Yes.
There's so many tropes in Hollywood where it's just like, okay, this is another cookie cutter show. I've seen this a billion times.
Yes.
Like, where's the unique stuff? Where are the folks who are going off the road, and trying to really give that good lens into what's really going on or what could potentially happen, or, just kind of give a different view.
Right.
It's
interesting to hear you say that. So before we started, and you've said this a couple times, you said, I'm more of a behind the camera kind of person, right? Like you said that. Now, anybody that's going to watch this and me sitting across from you right now will say, you are definitely an in front of the camera kind of person, right? From the exterior perspective, right? I mean, there's that's one viewpoint, right? But to hear what you're saying gives me clear indication of how you actually think.
Yeah.
From behind the scenes. So what I would say, and these are interesting things to learn, like in each one of these conversations, my hope is that we learn more about each other, right? To get to know each other better, but also to be able to take that knowledge that we learn from each other, and then how do we use that fundamentally here, right? In the business environment, right? I don't want to just make it about work, right? But at the same time, that is what brings us together. That's the shared part of our journey, if you will, at this point, right? And so how do we take that skill set and apply it to what we're doing here? So we start here. We're starting this podcast. We'll have, I'm telling you, we're going to have a number of these conversations over the course of this year, right? Here on the podcast, because we're just going to keep rotating throughout the whole year. And we'll learn each other, and we'll learn things about each other that will result, I think, in us being able to create more interesting stuff here at the agency. So my desire with all of this is, number one, it's a means to communicate myself and us here at the agency so that our clients and or potential clients can see who we are, what our thought process is, and it gives them a better understanding of who we are and what we do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that will be appealing to a lot of people because they'll say, no, I see what they're about there, right?
Yeah.
And I think what we're about here is a lot different than what any other company would be, and that doesn't make it better or worse. It just makes us about us, right?
Yeah.
So the more we can be us, and the more we can figure out how to create things here that not only promote us, but that also are things that we can do to promote our clients in different ways. I think that's what the special thing is here. So from where you're coming from, I'm going to hope that we continue to learn from each other and that you'll be able to say, Chris, this is cool what we're doing here. And you might say, that episode was kind of bullshit. It didn't feel real, or we're doing something different, because I want it to be as real as possible, right?
Yeah.
Like what we do here. And so I hope that, you'll be part of the process of helping us shape whatever it is that we do here so that we're creating stuff that's real, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people overuse the word transparent, right? Like it's a big word, transparent, right?
It's one of those key words, yeah. But it's essential. That's one thing I really look for in the different places that I choose to work in, because I find that my creative flow really gets hampered when folks try to put it within that cube of commercialism and corporate environment. It just gets so rigid, and I'm like, okay, I can only operate between here, or else you kind of get ostracized, like, oh, she's not operating in the boundaries, get her out of here. And I'm like, I'm too creative for that. I need that open space. I need that dialogue. I need that synergy with the people that I'm working with.
Yes.
And it kind of it all feeds in, So
I'm glad to hear that, because that's really what this year and the remaining years of many years that we'll be doing this here is. I really want to take the creative work that we're doing to another level. Obviously we're a retail automotive advertising agency, marketing agency, what do you want to call it? So there are some of those boxes, right? Like literally, like a lot of the work that you do is in boxes and in rectangles, right?
It's always like that.
It's always like that. But that's one piece of the work that we do for clients. And I believe strongly that we're entering an era in our industry, retail automotive, where I think our clients, I think most dealers are tired and exhausted of just the same old, like, $199 a month, just that kind of ad nauseum, same old.
The info doesn't change, but the look can.
Yes.
The presence can, and the way we give that information out can change.
Yes.
You can make those innovative strides by, like you're on the pattern, like you're doing the motions, and then someone says, hey, what about this? And then they swerve a little bit, and then, hey, you did something completely new in the industry. Like that's the thing I like.
Well, that's what we're going to try to do.
Yeah.
Not try.
We're going to do it.
Yoda said,
like, we're on a podcast. I've never been in a podcast setting with any of my jobs that I've had. So I've had those open format conversations that kind of bridge us together, where we have more we can be more comfortable with sharing those kind of out of the box ideas and kind of refining them together, because that's that teamwork effort. Once you feel like you have to conform to one thing, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can't really show or share those really out of the box kind of things, and then you end up doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
It's that trust building.
Yes.
You gotta trust the folks you work with.
You couldn't have said that any better.
Yeah.
So question, let's talk about your creativity. Like if you were to go back to childhood years, at what point in time did you realize, okay, I am a creative person? And what was it that, what was the thing that got you started, if you will?
This might sound unique to you, but in the industry, it's so annoying to hear.
Right.
I loved cartoons, loved illustrations, loved things like that. But the thing that really kind of jump started it, only in retrospect do I see this. I saw Jurassic Park,
Uh-huh.
and my mom got me a dinosaur book, and I got a piece of paper and laid it on top and started tracing it because I was like, oh man, this is fun. Took it to my elementary school class, and they're like, oh my God, I'll give you 25 cents for that drawing. And I was like, all right, cool, I can get a gumball.
You were in business like right away.
It just happened. And I was like, I can get candy. So yeah, that was like, I think the star moment where I was like, okay, cool. Like I can kind of do my own thing, share it with my friends. They'll love it. And I get, gumballs. So
Now,
that
did
that
this
was the
turn into a
first.
steady operation for you?
It wasn't steady. It kind of just, that was a blip.
Right.
And then it kind of disappeared.
Mhm.
And I just enjoyed kind of drawing Disney characters on my own. They looked really wonky, but I was like, this is fun. Fox and the Hound. Cool. Here we go. But it really kind of took off because illustration became cathartic when I made the big move from California to Florida, from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Big change, right?
Big change at 11. And I was like, okay, I don't know anybody here. Let me watch all my Disney movies during the summer and let me enjoy doodling them in my notebook.
Right.
And from then I loved just drawing. And then once I had my hand on a computer, I was in places like DeviantArt, illustrators.com, if that existed back then. But I was just looking at art all over the place and I was fascinated. I was like, it's not animated, but there's so much care to the detail in things. I wanted to learn how they did that because I was just so curious. And it started on paper. It started with animation, started with anime, and it kind of just took off. And learning a little Photoshop didn't hurt.
Right.
And then I was like, okay. When I started thinking about careers, I thought I was going to actually go into computer animation. And then I was like, wow, graphic design is everywhere. Like,
yes.
It doesn't stop. Like it's not stopping anytime soon.
You're right. It's never ending.
Yeah.
It's never ending.
Yeah. And I would go on forums and kind of like snoop around, see what folks were talking about. And the more I found out about the animation industry, I was like, that's a lot of, you got to put your soul into it. You got to put your time into it. And you find about Disney and you're like, ooh, Disney's awesome. But they're also like, they're draining blood. Like they're pulling the essence out of people coming out like raisins. I was like, Are
you serious? Is that is that really what it's supposed to be like?
That's like not what it's supposed to be like,
right,
but you have this big conglomerate Disney and they're like, listen, we got a time frame. Boom, boom.
Right.
Make each and every one of these frames every few seconds, precise.
So it's just crazy intense and just burns people out.
Yeah, that's,
you didn't want that.
Yeah, I didn't know about that term at the time, but I was like,
right.
Folks look like they're struggling, like they love it and they love the effect that it has on those who kind of like, absorb the positive, happy feelings. But the folks behind the screens, they're suffering. And I didn't want to go through that. So I could admire all the effort. Like I see animation, I'm like, I know they put their blood, sweat, and tears in it. I admire this. But, you got to take it. Yeah. Like, there's some things where you learn so much about it and you're like, oh, okay. Maybe not. Maybe I don't want to do that because there's some things where you get involved with it enough and you start to get a little jaded. And I didn't want to get jaded about animation. I always wanted that, like throughout the course of my lifetime, I want to be able to enjoy that.
Have that be something that's special.
Yeah.
Right. Keep that in a special place.
Exactly. So now, like illustration is cathartic. It's not what I do every day, but it kind of feeds that energy into what I do as a graphic designer. Like I'll start experimenting on textures and colors on an illustration, like a character design. And then I come into work and I'm like, oh, I remember how I could use the overlay with the texture here, and that would really make the background of this pop. So it kind of feeds itself as long as I keep one away from work and play.
Right.
And then next thing you know, simultaneously, I'm doing both.
Do you feel that your life's path and the decisions that you made have led you in the right direction? Like at this stage in your life, do you feel that, okay, yes, I may be I may see myself further along, or maybe I'm further ahead than I thought. But do you feel like you're on the right road with what you're doing?
Yeah, I always figured I was supposed to be somewhere in the arts.
Mm-hmm.
There was two roads that I noticed when I was younger. I was either going to work with animals or I'm going to be in the arts.
Okay.
And when I was younger in high school, I was able to experience working with animals. I worked at an animal hospital for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I started as a volunteer to get community service hours, and they're like, "Wow, like you really have a good, you have a good energy with the animals. You're able to calm them down when they're in these stressful environments and stuff like that." And I was like, "Yeah," and they hired me, and I was like, "Cool." And there were multiple doctors that actually worked in that animal hospital, so I saw the great.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the not so great.
Yeah.
And I was like, as passionate as I am about animals and their care, I was like, that would leave me so jaded. And I really want to continue to care. So, what my path forward is now is to, have art as my career
Mm-hmm.
and volunteer or
There
do
you go.
something else like that.
Right.
So I can really, because I was ready to report people to the ASPCA. I was like, they don't get a pet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like they don't get an animal
in the
companion.
context of where you were working with it, or just general in life, if you saw something that was not someone that was not appropriately handling their animals or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, there were people who would come in on the last leg because this animal has been sick for so long.
Right.
And they're like, "Oh, we don't, that's too expensive, or we don't want to address it." They kind of turn a blind eye. And I mean, like, this animal's suffering through life. And they'd bring it in like, "Oh, this is just so bad. Here,
Right.
do something, solve this whole thing." And we're like, it's gone past.
Right.
We can't,
Nothing we can do at this point in
nothing
time.
we can do.
Huh.
And I was like, this is harsh. This is the harsh reality of so many things. Like there's extremes.
Right.
There's the happy-go-lucky, and then there's the dark side. So I was like, yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what it was like to grow up in California and then move to Florida.
Now that I'm older,
Right.
childhood always has that rosy tint,
Yes.
And growing up in California, I was sheltered. I was happy. My mom was close by. My dad was close by. Everything was just like a little nucleus.
Mm-hmm.
Like even the setup of where we lived had like this center area where all the kids could kind of just meet and play. Like it was very, picturesque when I
Okay.
could look back at it. So when that was uprooted and we came to Florida and it was just a whole new dynamic, I was like, oh, what? Let me relearn this at 11,
Mm-hmm.
and it changed me a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind me asking, when you said mom was close by, dad was close by, that gives the impression that they weren't right there.
What do you mean, before or after?
Like in California, you said mom was close by, dad was close by. Did you all live together, or were
Yeah, we lived together.
Right.
Honestly, I'm talking about like the layout of the house. Because
I'm like, what happened here?
no. It was a unique setting because my mom was a property manager.
Okay.
And we had like the setup of the place that we lived. There were apartments,
Right.
but there was two different sections. There was the apartment building,
Uh-huh.
and there were the apartments that were centered around a putting green.
Ah.
And her office was literally connected to where we lived.
Okay. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I would be doing homework during the summer, and I'm like, oh man, I need to get this check so I can go outside and hang out with my friends.
Right.
And I just there was the kitchen, and then there was a door, and then there was her office.
Gotcha.
So I'd be like, oh man, I gotta wait till this person gets out of her office so I can get my homework checked, so I can have my final freedom.
So it sounds like it was like an interesting kind of ideal way to grow up. Having living there, your mom working there, and just being able to kind of
there was
have so
always
much experience
access.
there.
So I was just like, okay, cool. It was a really unique setting. When I described the layout of the property to other people, they're like, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool.
So then you guys pick up and you come to Florida, and it's like a whole different deal, right?
Yeah, it's like any other shift, but it was across the country.
Right.
Whole new dynamic as far as the people I was encountering. I enjoyed it because, we're on the podcast. We're being honest.
Yeah.
In California, I was the only black kid in class.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was the only one. There was like one other kid, and we kind of had our grift. And I was like, man, why can't we just get along? And then I came here, and I was like, oh man, like everybody wants to fight. Why? Like I just want to kind of like learn what I learned because I'm very interested in what's going on in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
It was middle school, so kids are, kind of wilding out.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, can we focus? Can we just share what we like and move on? And it was just like, oh, you like that? You like this? And I was like, this is constant criticism. That's crazy.
What's it like? I mean, seriously, you're the only, you're the only black girl in your school,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is it? Do I say black girl? Do I say girl? Girl of color? Like, what's the best way to say that?
We can say black. In California, I was young. I didn't notice. I didn't know I was different.
Right.
I was just kind of running around like my friends are my friends. We didn't really see. It was quote unquote colorblind because I was just like, we're all kids. That's how I saw it.
Right. So that's what you felt inside.
That's how I felt inside until, you go from first grade, second grade, third grade, kids start being a little bit more aware. They're like, hey, you're a little other. And I'm like, whoa, I am. But that's not a bad thing. That's just how I am.
Right.
I see you, you see me, we cool. But yeah, it would kind of like, it would pop up every once in a while with folks who came from out of state. Actually, that's a common thread that I noticed, who didn't kind of like,
they weren't Californians.
Yeah, they weren't Californians, and they didn't kind of like start from kindergarten to what was it, 5th grade,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And there were those moments where I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I see that you see me in another light. That's cool. Put you over there.
See, that's that's the, just listening to that, there's a sadness I perceive a sadness to that it's like, you start off and you're like a little kid and there's no realization of this, and then as time goes on,
Mm-hmm.
right, then just whether it's little comments or whether it's just little observations, right, and then it's almost as if you have to start sort of defending yourself and protecting yourself, and
yeah,
you
got to start building little boundaries. Like, oh, okay, I see there. That's the mind space there, and I gotta kind of block them off a little bit,
right?
Because they're not trying to hear what I'm talking about. They just recognize, from however they're being, however they're developing. They
Right.
they see you and they're like, oh, blurred. So yeah, then you kind of have to, you got to mature a little bit,
What do you think is at the root of that? Like what is it? I mean, are people just are people just that afraid of different? Are we all just like that afraid of like what is, different than us because we don't understand it? Like where does this come from?
That's a tough one. It's quite layered.
Yeah.
But if we're gonna go to like layman's terms, I guess people have their comfort zones.
Mm-hmm.
People are used to what they're seeing around them. Homogenous. They know this person looks the same as that person, so on and so forth. So when someone new comes in, it's like either I have questions or I have judgments from the comfort zones that have kind of informed me on what's the better or the worse. It's value systems that people kind of, project out. But I don't quite know what the root is. There's tribes, there's tribalisms. Who knows?
I know. It's like, during the summer, I was on a real kick. I was listening to like every history of the world video that I could. Like I go out and I ride my bike for a couple hours, and in one ear I have my, my headphones, and I would just listen. And the if there's one thing that I can take from having listened to history of Europe, history of Africa, history of the Middle East, is that every time period in the world, it was like somebody was in power, somebody was fighting to take the power, somebody was invading this country, somebody was invading that. And it has been just a never-ending battle between this tribe, this city, this country, that country, and always over kind of very similar reasons, right? Either financial or natural resources, right? Cultural differences, religion, right? These things that for literally thousands of years, the human race has been fighting these same exact fights over and over and over. And you could look right now and it's still going on, and just in different ways. And it's like, Are we just that fucking dumb? Right? Like, is there something about the human species that our soul is trapped in that we just can't fucking figure out how to get past this?
Yeah. With my interest in the animal kingdom,
Yes.
sometimes I don't know if it's has any legitimacy or not, but what I like to do is sometimes I like to find about the strange facts that are going on in the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, do Wolverines fight like we do? Is it based off of, that person's living over there and this person's living over here and we want that thing? Like, do they end up fighting? And I find out, like, I think that's just an element of life. Somebody's trying to get something better for themselves, or someone's trying to feel better about themselves, or, and then I moved on from animals and I went to space. And I was like, are the elements battling too? Like, there's just things where we just kind of...
Seriously, did you literally think, like, are the elements in the universe battling the way, like
microcosm to the macrocosm? I'm like, is this happening with every single stage of just like a living presence? Is everything fighting? Is everything in just juxtaposition to each other? Some bond, some repel, some like explode, some mesh together. Like, why is this a constant pattern?
Right.
And it seems to be pretty constant.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating that you
and that's
took
what
it
kind
to
of
that
like
level.
that kind of like calms me down, where it's just like, if someone's kind of just clashing with me, then I'm like, okay, they're just on a different journey. They're seeing this from a different perspective. They're open or closed. They're doing their own thing, and they may not be receptive to the information that we've collected so far in all of humanity, and they're kind of just doing all their own thing. So it kind of just like, all right, it is what it is at the moment.
I told you that we are going to end up having a lot of these conversations, because
Yeah.
that is a whole literally universe of conversation that we can go into. At some point in time, but I'm not ready to go there. It's funny, before you were like, yeah, am I going to get closer? I'm the one actually, like, I feel like, are my lips dry? Are they wet? Are they dry?
That's what I was thinking. I was like, do I need to take a sip of water? But I'm like, my hands are cold. So I don't want to touch it.
I'm going to have a sip of my tea in my fancy paper cup.
Hey, I know. Thank you for giving me this gorgeous.
Yeah, you got the nice.
You got fancy with me.
Yeah, you got the fancy glass.
Thanks.
What would be, if there were like anything that you could see us do here at the agency, right? Like, if you were like, it would be so cool if we did this. No limitations, right? Like, within the creative space and within something that a client would actually be interested in. What would that be?
Man, you really hit me with a curveball there. If there was something we could do here, because I mean, we have clients that aren't strictly automotive. Like, we have Pause.
Yes, we do.
I don't know. I would love to have animals in the office. That would be just the mesh of my two worlds, and I'd be like, oh, that would be great. And have them in commercials.
Okay.
That would be great. Let's see.
Well, let's just stick with that. Okay. So that's that. All right. So that's one idea right there, right?
I'd be the handler.
We have a client, right? And it's my best friend Joel. It's one of his side businesses, the Pawplex, right? And it's a doggy and cat it's a doggy daycare and grooming place, right? Well, now that I know about this, who better to help us like craft some really cool messaging for them than you, right?
Yeah.
All right, Joel, take notice. And we've unlocked the universe to marketing the doggy daycare. It's so funny. That's like, at this point in time, that's really our only non-automotive account. It is. Without a doubt it is.
Like, when we're planning jobs and stuff, like who's going to get what, it's like, if you're having a stressful moment, you get the paw.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like,
does Aaron do that?
Yeah. We're like, okay, relax, see the puppies, make the marketing. Just relax.
I didn't know that. That's so funny.
Yeah, it's a treasured account.
Oh,
like
really?
that.
It's just a little bit like, here, take it easy. Let's work with the cats and dogs for a little bit. That's fucking great. That's
how the paw gets passed around. We're like,
that's fantastic.
Need a moment.
That's great. Well, I'm going to say that this has been the first of what I believe is going to be many interesting conversations that we will have. I thank you for joining me here on this conversation.
Thank
You
you
did
for
great.
having me.
You're welcome.
That's it. That's it. It's
Yeah,
so fast.
Yeah, I know. It goes pretty quick, right? It's almost been 40 minutes, right?
Wow.
Yeah, 35, 40 minutes goes by quickly. And at some point in time, I think we're going to do, these things will start going a lot longer. But right now, we'll use this as a logical and sensible pause in this conversation.
Yeah, it's the first run.
That's right. So till next time, Sydney, thank you. You
Thank
did
you
a
for
great
having
job.
me.
It was a lot of fun.
Thanks.
All right, you got it. Bye.
Bye.